It's National Teacher Appreciation Week, and we at PBS NewsHour want to look at the reality of being an educator in America. A report released last month by the National Education Association shows that in the 2021-2022 school year, new teacher salaries increased by 2.5% from the year before, one of the largest increases since the NEA started tracking these numbers.
We have been really fighting to raise those salaries.
Becky Pringle is the head of the NEA. She says their findings also show that on average, all teachers' salaries failed to keep up with inflation.
And so overall, over these last 10 years, salaries have actually declined. They've declined by 6.4%. The reality is that to attract and to retain, and especially when we're talking about teachers of color, that we're losing them at a disparate rate than other teachers.
So there isn't necessarily one teacher shortage, but there are pervasive shortages across the country.
Desiree Carver-Thomas is a researcher with the Learning Policy Institute.
We see shortages in almost every state when it comes to math, science, and special education, shortages in schools serving more students of color, in schools serving more low-income students. And so shortages are a massive problem on the national scale, even if they're not happening in every single school.
To address this, governors in Mississippi, New Mexico, and Florida have given educators raises. The NEA report breaks down teacher salaries by state to show where teachers are getting paid more and where they're getting paid less.
We provide that information based on the information we get from our states so that they are armed with the information they need so they can fight for the resources that are necessary to not only raise beginning salaries, but to raise salaries throughout our teachers' professional continuum.
Carver-Thomas says that another problem is that fewer people are considering education as a viable career option.
When teachers or prospective teachers cannot envision that they're going to have a competitive salary, they might not go into teaching. It might be a barrier to even considering the teaching profession.
And school administrators acknowledge that compensation is a problem when it comes to recruitment and retention.
We want to make sure that our teachers are able to earn a family wage job. Many of our teachers currently actually take a second job to support their families. And that's, I think, a real challenge for our staff.
Michelle Reed is superintendent of Fairfax County Public Schools in Northern Virginia, which has 13,000 teachers. She says the 4% pay increase planned for all employees for the next school year should help with recruitment. Reed says COVID-19 and the shift to virtual learning and back added to the strain on American school systems.
In our country, we've seen a shift, I think, in the support of our educators over time, over these last few years that you've seen. And also, honestly, I think a real challenge as we've worked through a pandemic and looking at our ability to meet the needs of each and every one of our students coming out of the pandemic.
Pringle, a former teacher who now leads the NEA, says that poor working environments are also part of this nationwide problem.
Now, on top of that, we're seeing the deliberate disrespect of educators, the attack on educators. All of that has made this job, the job of teaching and nurturing and supporting our students, so much harder.
In fact, a recent NEA survey says that 55% of teachers are considering leaving the profession.
One of the strongest predictors of whether or not a teacher will remain in their classroom is how supportive they find their school leaders. So teachers who report that their school leadership is not very encouraging, not supportive, they're more than twice as likely to leave their classroom or leave the profession.
Superintendent Reed says the current political and cultural climate is not helping.
One of the things that I have seen as a real challenge is the politicization of many of the topics that our educators teach. Just as our educators are professionals, we're providing really competing guidance at times for how to best serve the needs of our students and our communities. And I think that gets to be, at some times, I think that can be really overwhelming and exhausting for staff.
There are even more challenges when it comes to retaining and recruiting teachers of color.
We know that they are the ones that are most impacted by this wage gap because too many of them take on excessive student loans and they don't come from generational wealth. In fact, too many of them come from generational poverty. And so they have more of a burden to bear when their salaries are lower.
Experts and administrators agree that there's no quick fix to a chronic teacher shortage. Superintendent Reed says Fairfax County is hiring year-round, and they're looking at non-traditional candidates, like people who have a bachelor's degree but may not have formal teacher training. Pringle says better wages and support for educators are a start, but it will take leadership and government to make meaningful, lasting changes.
If those who are in positions of power, either appointed or elected, aren't going to make the changes that will make a difference for our babies, then we have to vote for people who will. Those are the kinds of things that we are focused on to make a difference.
Educators, administrators, and politicians on both sides of the aisle seem to agree that more needs to be done to help the education landscape in America. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nicole Ellis.